Yeah, my name is Keith Derrickson. I am the Academic Technology Support Manager here at UNL. So as Todd mentioned, we are interested in sort of exploring AV asset management and how we can tie that to our incident response capabilities that
Okay.
we have with a new service management tool. So my role on campus is we manage about 140 classrooms for AV and project-based items as well. So just sort of here to take a look at what's going on.
Cool. All right. Thanks. So my name is Chris Whitehead. I work at USC here in California, Los Angeles. I'm the ITSM process engineer, which is really just a title. As much as anything, I have a BA background and an ITIL expert background, so it's kind of a little bit of both. Depends on what we need. You know, if we're doing process work, implementing new processes, enhancing processes, I get into that stuff. If we're doing things where we're taking requirements and building things within the tool, do a lot of that, testing, training. I have a background in reporting, so we do that kind of stuff. I do not really have any background in configuration management. My experience, quality configuration managements are people that lock themselves in a dark room and you don't really ever see them, but they will work somewhere for 30 years. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean, that's cool. Those people are invaluable. We don't really have anybody like that over here. This is a relatively small operation. Our service management program is 4 staff. Full-time. And we've been using ServiceNow for probably 18 months or so, but only with the full organization. I work in the central IT organization, ITS. We have a federated model, so the campus community has their own local IT in many places. So we provide the central things like the network and the infrastructure and the business apps and whatever. I'm sure you guys are familiar with that model elsewhere. And for our full ITS internal organization, we've all been in there for about a year. The exception being that we migrated our learning environments classroom support team earlier this year rather than in the big bang with the rest of the folks last December. So when we brought the classroom support guys in, it was a slightly different challenge because it's not a standard IT organization necessarily in the way that other parts of the organization are. You know, because they handle different equipment, they have a different business process where they're out in classrooms. Whilst any kind of major incident is bad news from a central IT department in terms of infrastructure and network, you know, we really can't be allowing the classrooms equipment to not work for more than really at all, but for more than a handful of minutes at a time. So they have a very serious set of service levels that they're working to and things like that. So we did them a little later because they wanted a little bit more comfort. They're at, and just for context, they're actually now, historically not so much, but now they are part of our wider customer support organization. So they share a director with the customer support center that answers the phone and some other folks there. And they had a really good process for incident management that they were working with and request management. And they had a really, they had previously been doing it in Jira. But I've been here for 18 months. My background before this was corporate, not in education. So they probably had the best process that I'd seen that was being followed and being kept to than any of the other teams here. And I think that's an education industry issue, is there's not a lot of hard focus and hard requirements to stick to process, is I think I've seen. So that was good that they had that because it meant that their requirements were much clearer and they knew what they wanted and what they wanted to get out of it. One of the things they wanted to get out of it, where I'm trying to lead to that, is they wanted to be able to track their assets. And so I can't speak to every tool because it's been a while since I was exposed to a different tool. And things probably have changed or I've forgotten them. But in ServiceNow, the asset and the configuration items are linked properties. So you have a CI that relates to an asset. You have an asset that relates back to the CI. It's like a two-way relationship. Now, I think that some tools do that and some tools don't. They keep them separate, or they would keep it as one record with kind of two parts to it. But in ServiceNow, they're related. So if you have a CI, you need to have an asset. So obviously your CI can be, you can replace the asset in theory and retain the CI, or less so the other way. So essentially what we did was we had to sit down and figure out how to bring these things in, because the CI classes and the asset classes were really all pretty much around hardware for classroom support, because we were talking about projectors, processors, screens, and things like that. These are the things I'm sure you guys are familiar with and already thinking about. So the asset piece was easy. They were just classified as hardware assets primarily, obviously not software or licenses or things like that. In terms of the configuration piece, ServiceNow has a lot of what they call the CI class that comes out of the box. So whether that's like a server, Linux server, Windows server, VMware, et cetera, phone infrastructure, network infrastructure, all those things. It did not have anything out of the box that was particularly well suited to, and this is where I'm going to fire up my screen now, that was particularly well suited to that classroom support, academic technology kind of piece of it. So we had to go in and create some new classes. So if you see here, we actually create, can you guys see this? All right, yep. So you can see here, if, oops, wrong one. Didn't mean to do that. You can see here in our configuration item, we actually have a list of all the different types of classes that we have. And you can see here, these are the ones that we added for our LE folks. None of these were there before. And we started from scratch with those. So when you click in here, you'll see the type of things that make up, the CIs that make up these. And so that was a bad choice, actually, displays. Let's go with a controller. Nope, that was process is probably better. So from our point of view, what they wanted to do was they wanted to have the room, the building and room as be the first part of everything that is in there in terms of the name. And so that's their nomenclature, that's fine. And then from there, we figured out what each type of CI was by kind of class or type. So in this case, this would be a processor. They originally had a list that were probably about 25 things long, and then we consolidated it back to these 10 or so that are here, kind of combining things together a little bit. And some of this information is dummy. We don't actually have. So in terms of our asset tagging, we have a couple different criteria here within USC and within ITS. The USC ones are really for items that are above a certain price threshold, which these were not, or they were not tagged at the time. And none of these things had ITS asset tags because historically this group had not been part of the core of ITS. So that's why that's blank, and this one is one of our dummy schemes that we use for tagging the assets. And then equally, they did not have access to or knowledge of or all of the serial numbers for a lot of this kit. So we again instituted a dummy process, as you can see here from this serial number, where we just put LE in front of everything. So this is actually the CI view. If I click through here, can you guys see this pop-up window?
No, that's not coming through.
Oh, that's interesting.
Just a black, or for me, maybe it was still coming through. I don't know if anybody else saw it.
I'll just open one of these instead.
Yeah, it was a blank pop-up for me too. So
okay.
Yeah. So then this is actually the asset view. So what you'll see here is that this links back to the configuration item, and there's a click through here, which is what opened that pop-up. And on this way, it actually opens up. You can go click through to the asset. So as I said, the two items are interrelated and linked, and actually share many of the same pieces of information between them. So this is actually on the asset side, which I think is what you guys were mostly interested in, rather than the CIP. So assets in ServiceNow have a kind of a type, so consumable, hardware, license, other, or software types. These obviously are predominantly we set up as hardware, And then within those, they have the model category, which came out of the CI. So this would be an AV processor with a model associated. And then actually a lot of this information from there on out just we didn't have or was not considered to be required or mandatory by the learning environments folks. So that's why you're seeing so many empty fields here. But the scope of what you can put in here, as you can see, is pretty vast.
So just a quick question. Sorry to interrupt you.
Please.
Are all these fields basically kind of given to you out of the box? I mean, you didn't configure like all this assigned to, managed by, location, department, company, all those, were they basically just out of box offering?
Pretty much. I think we have a few custom fields in terms of the two types of asset tags, and obviously we customize the field names on those. I think one of them is out of the box and we change the name, and the other one is custom. Mm-hmm. And then the rack and shelf fields that obviously don't apply to this equipment. That's really more the data center side. I'm pretty sure those are custom too. Most of the rest of these fields, to the best of my knowledge, and they did set up a lot of the actual core of the asset tool part of the tool right before I joined the group around 18 months ago. But to the best of my knowledge, most of the rest of this stuff is just out of the box within ServiceNow.
And Chris,
and as you can see here, there are multiple tabs within the asset. So this is kind of the general info. So if you, there's all these fields here that you may or may not be able to make use of, and you can customize which ones you show based on the type of the hardware or the license. You would probably show different field types for each. We're pretty much showing most things here. And then obviously you can move in. If you're doing financial management within ServiceNow, which we are not, you have all the options here to utilize. And then as you move through the life cycle of an asset, you get the disposal information as it's retired. So what did you do with it? Was it resold? Did you donate it? Things like that. One of the things that our CIO is starting to move us towards is trying to find ways to reuse retired assets in terms of, can we donate them to a local community group or a local middle school or high school or something like that. Probably not so much with the AV equipment. And then again, there's a lot of information in here that if you're planning to integrate financial management, there's like a ton of things you can do in here. We're not using any of that. Our financial systems are completely separate currently. So just wanted to give you guys kind of a scope of the information that can be used in here and how vast it is, but actually how little of it we're using. And that's why I was trying to make this not be a big deal last week when I was saying, yeah, I mean, we're doing it, but it's not world changing, you know?
Hey, Chris, if you don't mind, did these assets originate in ServiceNow, or is there any kind of, database import feature of any kind that would allow us to bring in existing assets from another system?
Yeah, that's a great question. So with the way this works is, you can do imports from different ways of doing it. So I can't speak to options with APIs and linkage between two systems like that. But what we have is what they call a transform map, where you set up, basically we take it in as a pretty basic Excel sheet with columns and rows that relate to different fields within here. And then there's a transform map. So you feed that spreadsheet in as an import, and then the transform map says, take this column and put it into this field, take this column, put it into that field, so on and so on. And that's how we got many of our actual things. The wider configuration management database came from that, and periodically we do more uploads as more CIs come into existence. Like, for example, our research computing group has a huge set of nodes and a huge part of our data center, and they're constantly replacing and upgrading and trying to stay ahead of the curve. So they're constantly bringing in maybe 20,000 new things at a time. That 20,000 is too high. Like 1,000 things every time they do an upgrade and retiring out new ones. So obviously the people that are managing that don't want to be typing 1,000 things in by hand, so they'll use the transform map. And we did the same thing with this, with the classroom support items. That they had to actually, I think a lot of the data they went out and gathered, they actually went and inventoried the rooms by hand. So they would go and look in classroom ZHS 159, figure out what equipment was in there, and then write it down and then put it into the spreadsheet afterwards, because I don't think they had a central source before, which is why they were so keen to get to this, because they want to be able to know, you know what, if that processor in ZHS 159 is breaking all the time, maybe next time we should buy a different brand. Or maybe we should be telling the vendor this sucks, or doing whatever it is that they need to do. So yeah, it is possible to get things in the most basic way through a CSV or an XLS import, and then have that transform map. There might be fancier ways if you have an existing CMDB system that you're using where you could API it, but we did not primarily.
Hey, Chris, this is Mitch. Yeah, we pretty much do the same thing. We'll, through a transformation, whenever we get new equipment in, slap a barcode on it, scan it, create an Excel file from it, and then based on what our ServiceNow admin or developers set up, be able to transform that information into the appropriate CI and asset class. So it's not rocket science, right? Just a lot of hard work. So
yeah.
So a quick question. Well, actually two. So one thing is, do you have any kind of capability of showing reporting, just like general reporting around what's in your database and what are all your assets? And then the second question is, how does it link to your incident, in the sense of, or how does it help you, I guess, having it in this space?
Yeah, both. So why don't I show you something like that really quickly? So the reporting in ServiceNow is really, I think, actually, it's a little bit dense, takes a little bit getting used to, but once you have a handle on it, it's as good as anything I've used. And so far, we've not had to do a lot of, well, let me take this data and put it into Excel, or let me take this data and put it into whatever, So that, and like I say, I used to work in an SLM team. It was kind of a hybrid service level management, supplier management group. We did a lot of reporting. All of it was in Excel, and we had dudes writing stuff all the time in Visual Basic and all things. These huge XLS files, and they were hard to work with, and they would crash a lot. Know how to do any of that. Not going to the same level of detail, but I think the reporting engine here is pretty good. So I think that's kind of what you're asking me. And then, so what I'll show you here is, let's just take a look at incidents that have been, that were managed by our learning environments group. And, oh, wrong field. Yeah, so everything is just condition based in here. And so if I just do, let's take a look at everything that was opened in the last 3 months that was assigned to that group. And let's group it by the configuration item. And then what we'll see here is a list when it loads. And the Wi-Fi is a little slow, so it might just take a little while to crank the handle.
Chris, what version are you running? Just out of curiosity. Helsinki?
We are running Geneva, which is 1 back from the current version, but I'm sure very quickly will be 2 back, because I think they have a coming before the end of the year, right?
Istanbul.
Yes, that's right. But I think it's coming out very soon, right?
The general availability or the release version? Or like the one that happens before the release version?
Yeah, I'm not sure, but I think so. I'm thinking about the guys in Nebraska. If you're going to be buying a tool, I think by the time you get there, it'll be 2 versions on from this.
Yeah, the reporting hasn't changed. I was just making that point because the reporting, what they're looking at, hasn't changed a lot between the versions, and so
right.
Unless you like the predictive reporting, but
yeah, they made most of the changes in the version before this. I think the F version. So yeah. So what we'll see here is I just show me every incident from the last 3 months that was assigned to that group, and then let's group it by the CI. So what you can see here is you can start to drill into maybe if I'm seeing a lot of incidents for the same piece, maybe we need to go look at, should we replace that piece of equipment? Is that piece of equipment something we should maybe not buy next time? Or whatever decisions you want to make about the vendor or the specific piece of hardware. So nothing here is too crazy. This one has 4, I guess. but I'm not seeing anything that was really jumping out at me as scary, other than there was one that had 20 something, but that was actually where somebody had reported against the business service of Linux-based design rather than actually picking a specific piece of equipment.
Hey, Chris, do you have, does the AV team, are they in charge of updating the assets and configuration? So if like, they get a new slew of Epson projectors in and they want to deprecate the Panasonic ones, or if some attribute changes, are they in charge of that, or do they send it to a configuration management team to
Yeah, we have a couple folks that are managing the CMDB kind of part-time on behalf of our program. And so if they have feedback on those things, they would feed it back to that group. I mean, they would probably copy us so we would know about it, but typically, yeah, that's how that would work. And
so would these incidents have been generated by the equipment, or what would have been the incident generation?
There's a couple paths. Let me just say one other thing. The learning space, the learning environment support team support the classrooms. There's actually a subset of that group that does the design and the build of classrooms and the rebuild. So I think that they would also be feeding that information back to the learning space design team as much as they would anybody else to say, you know what, that Panasonic is a real POS. Maybe don't buy that next time.
point of sale? That's what we're saying.
Yeah, we have a few paths in terms of incidents, and one of them is unique to the learning environments group because they had a bunch of pre-existing relationships with some of the faculty. So we have a generic service center support where you call and report an incident. The LE actually has their own phone number that you can get directly to them. So they predominantly get phone calls through that, but they do get a handful that come through our standard CSC. Anybody that has a USC ID, they can log in and authenticate to our systems, can log into ServiceNow via our website or web portal and report an incident. But the LE group actually, from their JIRA days, had their own specific web form that people would go to before we had an enterprise-wide solution like that. So we replicated a version of their incident report form that is available. It's actually a ServiceNow record producer. So let me show you that here. Let me, oh, great. It's just what you want to see. Okay, 1 second.
Chris, did you shibbolise your instance?
We did.
See, we have to talk later about that. We're having some trouble.
So my understanding is that we did not have a choice about that.
That will definitely be the way it is here. We will definitely require that, as well as two-factor probably.
Yeah.
Well, ServiceNow's official stance is that they support shibboleth, but I hear it's not as straightforward. So, but maybe another webinar, huh?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and we now have two-factor is mandatory for staff, and will soon be for faculty too, just as an aside on that as well. Okay, so what we did here was we built, they had a web form before that emailed into Jura. So what we did was we created a form within ServiceNow that automatically creates an incident. And when the form is submitted, it automatically creates that incident and automatically assigns it to the learning environments group. So they're cutting out an email piece and everything else. This is what ServiceNow refers to as a record producer, which is a form that is used to produce a ticket record of some kind. In this case, an incident. You can use this to create requests, to create changes, to create problems, to create whatever you want to do, the way you configure the workflow in the back end. And this is the primary route that they're using to get tickets in, to answer your question from, I don't know, 5-10 minutes ago now. And actually what a lot of their incidents is a student worker will identify the issue because they have student workers that hang out near the classrooms, can just drop in and things like that. And they will fill out the form and create the issue almost proactively. That's why the first question on this form is the customer involved, yes or no? Because if the customer is not involved, that's a different business use case for them than if a customer is involved. So if there is a professor or faculty member that's reporting the issue, Not so much that they're going to fix it faster, it just follows a different path in their workflow, in their business process. So most of the stuff is coming in this way. And then on this web form, there is not an option to choose a configuration item. We don't give that level of info to essentially end users, customers, because it would be confusing to them, and because we have like tens and tens of thousands of them. And that's the same in our regular incident support form as well. They just choose a business service. So if they would just choose classroom support, or they would choose email or something like that. And then we figure out the CIs internally within our licensed technical workers. And then, so what you'll see here, for example, if I expand some of these, is you'll see, you know, the incident, all these reported by different people. And then, you know, just what the issue was and what the piece of equipment was and which room it was in and things like that.
So in that case, if you could go to one of those incidents,
yeah.
Is there a pick list then for in that room? It because of your CI integration, does it know what's available and which items those are?
So that's a good question. We didn't go, let me actually just start, I'll start with a clean incident. We didn't actually go to the level of limiting the CI choice by the room that is chosen. But what, which I think is what you're asking me.
That's correct.
Because the room information is actually, this is our blank incident field here. And these are anything with a red star is mandatory that you have to put in at a minimum to create the incident. And this is the basic information we have here. And you'll see here that building and room is not actually part of this, this form. If I put this in here, or to put myself in here, the location is actually my work location, not the location of the incident. That's part of the customer information. So one of the things we did for the learning environments group is because they had a lot more fields that they were tracking and pulling data out that they didn't want to lose. So we actually added some custom fields just for them down here on this classroom support tab. And one of the things they wanted to know was what is the building and the room that the event is happening in. So in that case, you could just choose. So that's actually the meeting room next door to the room I'm in right now. But that doesn't affect the choice of the CI. We have, and again, you probably can't see this pop up. We have 18,000 CIs in there. So we limit them down by support group or type. So if they're gonna, they have around 1,000, 800 to 1,000 that are specific to the learning environments. I'm not sure the exact numbers because some of those things are the enterprise learning technologies and some of them are the learning support things. Like Turnitin and Blackboard have CIs as well that are not actually managed by that group, but I just did a quick look on learning. So it's showing me there's around that number. But when you pick a CI, like this one, I just picked up this Samsung screen. It will show you any other tickets that were related to that. When you open it, there aren't any here, so the actual field is not there. So no, we didn't limit it by building and room, but you definitely can if you want to. You can limit reference lookups in ServiceNow based on kind of however you want it to. So for example, the contact lookup for who's having the incident, we have 200,000 registered users across our user base that we get from our GDS feed, staff, faculty, students, alumni, affiliated users, all that kind of stuff. So that's just a pure lookup on every user in our system user table. But then when you come and look in the assigned to lookup, that's qualified, so you're only seeing the users that exist within our system that are also a member of the specific assignment group. It's just a very basic example of how you can limit out those things. So you could definitely limit your CI lookup based upon the room you chose. If your rooms and buildings are tied, are first of all correct and accurate, and secondly are then related within the CI fields itself.
Chris, this is Mitch. A quick question. So when you assign, the assignment group becomes a learning environment support, does the classroom support tab then appear and become mandatory because that's where you're putting the actual location of the classroom in the CI as well?
Yeah. So when you choose the learning environment support, this tab appears. This tab has multiple mandatory fields on it beyond the basic ones.
Yeah.
And then you have to fill those out. If you create the incident using the web form that I just showed you guys a few minutes ago, I think all of those fields are, apart from one, are included in there, and they're just pre-populated when the incident's open, and the first person that picks up just has to fill in a couple additional fields. As soon as I change this back to a different group, like my team, if I save this record, that tab would disappear. It doesn't actually disappear until you save it, but I'm not going to save this because I'm not actually creating an incident.
Yeah,
but you can see it did make them all not mandatory, and then as soon as I save it, that field would be hidden again.
Right. Okay. Thanks.
UI policies just on update.
And so you could actually create, so like for an infrastructure group, maybe doing jack mapping and ports and stuff, you could create an infrastructure, a network tab or something that's very specific to them, that's similar to classroom support tab, but different information.
Yeah, you could. You can really do that. You can really go as far as you want with that. We're trying to avoid that at all costs because then it becomes difficult to manage and too much information and all that kind of stuff. This was really a compromise position between what we wanted and what they wanted. But actually, this provides so much value to that group. And like I said way earlier, because they actually had a good process and they were following it, we didn't want to make them worse because they're really a good shining example of us to show other people this is a great way to manage your stuff. So yeah, you can, these are just what ServiceNow calls UI policies. So like if this, then show this, and then, make these things mandatory, make these things not mandatory. Because originally they talked about just having like another 20 fields underneath here. And it's actually just cleaner if we put it on a separate tab. And we only want the people that are in that team to see it and worry about it and not have to have the, Linux admin group worry about these classroom support fields, things like that.
Makes sense. Thank
Tool's
you.
pretty versatile in that respect, but the more you customize, the more you have to worry about things down the line with upgrades and testing and so on and so on.
Yeah, Chris, I was just going to mention what you're mentioning, the impact if you're going to do an upgrade, or I just got a comment. I love the idea of using a separate tab as a UI policy and not making changes to the actual form itself, because we have a lot of different support teams that are asking for customization on the actual, I don't know what you would call it, but the form you see in front of you, as opposed to, okay, let's create, if need be, right? We're trying to steer away from over customization, but if need be, we'll create a separate tab just for your team to use. So I really like that idea as a compromise.
Yeah, I can't take credit for that idea because it was not my idea, but it is, as soon as somebody said it, I was like, dude, that's brilliant. Let's do that. And the other thing on here is users can, within their own personal view of ServiceNow, personalize the form a little bit to their own extent. This is something they introduced in the more recent version. So I can actually start to hide some of these fields if I'm not too worried about them outside of the few most basic and core ones. So if I'm not worried about people's alternate phone numbers, I'm not worried about if the ticket was converted from a different type. You can start to hide these fields away and kind of cut down the view a little bit as well, which is just only within that person's specific view, and that'll just stay until the next time they do it. I don't actually know what I just did there though, so let's just abandon that page because I don't want to open that incident. That makes sense? Answer the question.
It does. Well, I think so. I think that's the questions that I had. I don't know if you have any, Keith.
No, not specifically. I think I would be curious, to get my hands on it somehow. But yeah, I think it seems like it's quite powerful, and it didn't look like
it's actually. Mitch might have similar feedback. It's so powerful, and it's obviously the more that they expand it out into being not just an ITSM solution, but an enterprise-wide tool that can do all manner of things. It's really impressive, but actually, to some extent, it's more than we are currently need. I don't necessarily agree with that. I'm trying to figure out a way to phrase this. This is a relatively immature group from an IT service management point of view. And what we had before was a very basic tool, as far as I understand it. And most things were just done by emailing in and out of the tool. So it's definitely been a culture shift that we're still working through to get that adoption going. So that might be, I don't know where you guys are at in terms of maturity and all that kind of stuff. That might be a thing to think about. I truly believe in this tool and would advocate for it, but that's just an FYI. I don't know if you've had a similar experience, Mitch.
Well, I was going to say, do you? We talked a little bit earlier before you joined us, Chris, about something we're planning. Todd, Keith, do you mind if I ask Chris what his thoughts on that?
No, definitely.
So what our CIO is asking us to do is to treat the computer classrooms, whether they're computer classrooms or labs, like a critical CI. So if they're up against the classroom and a particular CI is down with a projector or controller, processor, whatever, to be able to be proactive about it and send through subscriptions notification to that faculty that the equipment in their classroom they're going to teach in is down. So like outage records and ServiceNow's ability to allow subscriptions. If you were to magic wand, how would you implement something like this?
That's a really good question. So you're talking about using the notify options to, if a CI in a specific room goes down in a classroom, to just send a text to the person or whatever to let them know.
Well, whatever devices they've added, right, as part of their notification.
Right. Yeah.
Right, absolutely. Just a way to give the next faculty member a heads up that, hey,
that's a really cool idea. I'm not gonna mention that to our LE folks for a few months.
Listen, pay your team a lot of money to implement it, right?
Yeah, no, I mean that's a cool idea, but what's your question is how to do that?
Well, I was just thinking, what are your thoughts around how to implement something like that? I mean, if you could wave your magic wand and make it happen for USC, I mean, what are some steps you would take? I mean, other than maybe the things that I've already mentioned, So
I think the first thing is we would have to build out the relationship between specific CIs and their actual building and room locations, which we have done to some extent, but have not 100% done. We actually have an issue with location data, which is an aside. We had to manually create our building and rooms because the location data that we get fed in automatically through our feed from GDS, which comes out of Workday primarily from people's staff records, is not good. There are multiple entries because people can write whatever they want into Workday for their address, right? So just for this building that I work in, there are like 20 different variations because people spelt it differently. Somebody would put South Grand Avenue as 2 words. Somebody would just put Grand Avenue. Somebody would put S Grand Avenue. Somebody would put S period Grand Avenue, all that kind of stuff. So we had to tear all that up and start over with a fresh set of building data that we got from our facility management folks. That's part of the reason why we don't have that full alignment. So the first thing we need to do is make sure that stuff is accurate. Then you would need to make sure that the incidents were being opened against the correct CI. So if you do have an outage with a piece of equipment in there, it needs to be made sure that they actually pick the projector in the room and not the room next door or the room upstairs or the room downstairs or whatever. Then you would need to make sure that you use, whether it's the outage record or from the incident record, make sure that the notify options that you were talking about there, Mitch, are actually created so that, first of all, that's turned on, because I think that's a plugin that's not turned on by default, or at least it's not in our instance, I don't think. And secondly, you would need to make sure that the right people actually have got notification devices beyond their primary in there. So for us, the primary is just whatever they put as their primary email address, again, in Workday, which is not necessarily the email address they actually use on a day-to-day basis, because, for example, if their email address is just, Chris at usc.edu, and that's the one that they were given, there's a really good chance that they actually use Chris at marshall.usc.edu or at one of the other schools where they have their subdomains, or at the hospital or whatever, and they actually use that one, but they never went back to Workday to update it as their primary, in which case their email would not be going to the right place. Or maybe they would actually want text or alerts in that, in which case they would have to go in and put their SMS details in as a notification device, which people do not necessarily do either. They just expect it to happen by magic, and we don't have that magic in place.
So even if you didn't have the notification set up to actually alert the subscribed users, is there a way to still have that data to do maybe out of side of the system. So even if you wanted to just get a list of faculty that might be associated with a room, would you still be able to do that without actually sending out a notification?
That's a really good question that I don't know the answer to. My guess would be that the classroom support folks do know. If not formally, then informally, they probably have a decent guess on specific things like that. I would really need to talk to the manager of that group or our customer service director. My other guess is that our operations center, who generally don't deal with classroom stuff, but they have a system where they're doing that stuff through Blackboard Connect for major incidents. They would probably have that I think it's tribal knowledge, I guess is what I'm saying, but I'm sure it could be formalized.
Yeah, we're
I don't
thinking
know enough about some of our things that are going on here to answer any better than that, I'm afraid.
Yeah, we have a Blackboard Connect, and we're looking at that as well, because I was telling a gentleman that the ServiceNow, it does a text message through SMS, so it's not actually it's an email at the text, right? So there's some delay, but I think for it'd be a combination of data that lives in CMS. So we use PeopleSoft for our CMS system. And also our scheduling, right? Scheduling office, which schedules the classroom, and they know who the faculty. So it's getting this disparate systems that have pieces of information to talk into ServiceNow so that we can have, the most accurate information.
Yeah, and I think we have some of those data sources, but I don't know that, and actually I think they're pretty clean, but none of the systems talk together. The interesting thing about it is that we may very well, assuming that we can find the money to have some integration, is that I think that the API opportunity is there. It's just a matter of scope of the project. And so I'm hoping that we can get those things in scope, because that's what makes things more useful, right?
Right. We haven't built any out, but my understanding is ServiceNow has APIs with almost every kind of major system you could think about. People are starting to come knock on our door and ask about them, and they seem to be of the impression that all we have to do is flick a switch and they're good to go, and I definitely don't think that's correct. And also, I don't think, and Mitch, I think you know my boss, Lisa, right?
Oh, just a little bit. Yeah. She's a great person. Yeah. Tell her I said hi.
Lisa is really great, but also at the same time, I don't think that she, and I agree with her, particularly want to just flick a switch and then hand off all responsibility for something to the group that says they're going to take care of it. Not because they can't, just because we want to have that oversight. And yeah, Mitch, I'm sure you know exactly what I mean.
Yeah, a little bit of knowledge is a dangerous thing, right?
Right.
I mean,
people seem to be coming to us with, oh yeah, this is cool. I read like a one paragraph thing on my product's website or your product's website, and it's super easy and it's clean, and I'll write the script and you guys are good to go. And that's where it's like, you know what, we maybe want to have a little more oversight than that. So that's just a thing to think about, I guess is what I'm saying.
Well, great. I mean, I think that you've really provided a lot of information, at least as insight into your system. It's really been helpful for me. Hopefully it's been helpful for Keith as well. We have a lot of some of the semantics I'm thinking about is that we have operationally kind of getting things into the system. We have a system that kind of manages that right when the items come in the door at kind of receiving level. And so it's a homegrown system. It allows you to put like multiple items in at once, and some of these kinds of refinements that allow us to get the assets in really easily from an kind of a receiving process. And so that's the other thing that, Keith, I don't know if you're thinking about it, but that would be the other thing that I would have possibly some issue with in the sense of trying to get the stuff in the system. It's pretty refined the way it is now.
That actually sounds, we did not have any of that. So that's one of the reasons they wanted to do this, even on such a small and immature scale. So if you have something already, that is actually a positive. So yeah, you don't want to break that and make it worse, right? I think it's the thing. So I get it. But there's probably ways that you can figure it out, whether that's a transform map. But you might not want to move away from that system full time, right?
And Chris, the financial and or depreciation kinds of financial things that you kind of briefly touched on, are those add-ons? Todd, is that correct?
They would know more better than I, but from my understanding, they are add-ons, and that's not one of the things that's in scope right now. Is the financial core piece or whatever they call it in our project.
So I think that you can use, like, there was a million fields for financial things on what I showed you on that record, right? You can fill them out without having to use any other part of the tool, as far as I know, but I think there are more specific finance management things that you can buy separately. We didn't do them. I don't know anything about them. I don't know if Mitch knows them.
Yeah, we don't have financial management turned on. I know you have to have a service portfolio management turned on as well. And it's just, you get into some real, people are really possessive about their particular domain, especially when it comes to finances, and so I think it's a cool idea to integrate your true cost of a service, but we're not doing that yet, Chris. So.
No, we're not. I'm not even sure how much appetite there is for it, because they're assessing where to move next with finance. We're on Koali, and I think they're planning to get away from it. So
even without the financial add-on, you might still be able to report from that information that is based on the CI or the asset. You might still be able to report on that field if it's already there.
If you put that information in there, I would assume you'd be able to use it and report off it. We just haven't done any of that. But those fields are there, and you saw them, and we don't have the finance piece in there, but those fields are still displayed. So I'm assuming that there's options.
Hey, Chris, do you know if any of the the assets you listed, any of those allow for dynamic updates of the particular CI? So if it's a management control or console, I don't know. I'm not really part of the AV world, but basically a system that monitors IP-based activity. Are there APIs written for, say, Extron or Crestron that allows you to monitor that in real time? Are you using any of that?
I don't know. I don't think, we don't have anything integrated like that. I don't know what tools that they're using to do monitoring, if any. I know that we do have, they do have something that will email in if like a bulb goes out. But I don't think that's what you were talking about, Mitch.
Yeah, this does two things. One, it helps to feed event management into creating incidents proactively, and also allowing to keep the CMDB updated in real time.
Yeah, so we don't have any event within the tool or really defined well as a process here. And we definitely don't have anything that's doing real-time feeds to the CMDB or the asset piece either. The only thing I do know is that they do have some of the systems have they will email if the bulb is low or something like that, and that will create an incident, but I don't think we've had any of those yet either.
That's probably through like an SMP trap or something like that. So, yeah.
All right. Well, I think we've probably surpassed our time that we allotted. Sorry about that. Sorry for going over.
That's mostly my fault for being late. I'm sorry about that.
No problem. So if we want to have a follow-up, maybe we can get people together again, depending on if people have interest, Mitch especially, and Chris, if you'd be willing. So we're continuing down this path on this journey, I guess you call it. And I'm hoping that we can get something good out of it, and we can get rid of some old databases that we have to manage anyway, and possibly save some money that way. So the other thing is that I think someone asked about maturity, and I think we're probably not quite as mature as we need to be to take on a ServiceNow, although I think we don't want to underbuy, because currently we're on BMC footprints and we're way past that as far as the feature set. And so we will be looking at some of these higher level tools. I think there's discussion about Sharewell as well, which is kind of in that mid-range, I think.
I know that Sharewell was ServiceNow and Sharewell were the top two when they did the evaluation here like 2 years ago. That was before I joined, but I know that was where they got to, was the two of them. I'm not entirely sure of whether it came down to, I'm not sure which was number one and which was number two, and I'm not sure whether the choice in the end was around price or performance.
Yeah, Todd, I would take a look at Team Dynamics too. They seem to be doing things in the higher ed space.
Yeah,
Comment.
absolutely.
So, obviously I'm always looking for potential webinars for our group. Would you mind, okay, do you feel that, say, let's see, we've got something going on in February. So maybe like March, April-ish, we could revisit and maybe talk about, or maybe get you guys to do a webinar for our group. We don't have to have it ServiceNow focused, but it'd be like, what is your institution, panel discussion, right? What is your institution doing about managing classrooms and better supporting our faculty and staff? So does that sound like an idea that you'd be interested in?
We would love to at least partake in it. I think we have some things to share, maybe even just around some of the process stuff. I think we all kind of, well, I don't know, I can't speak for Keith actually, but yes, we would definitely I would love to partake in that.
Okay, because it gives you a couple months to kind of take in what we just talked about today and see how whether you choose a tool or just mature your own process to come back and share this with the group, because I think this would be helpful. So,
yep. Agreed.
Chris, would you be okay with participating in a panel?
I don't know that I would have anything more to offer than we did now. There may be people that would be better placed to do that, but if you can't find any, I guess we could talk some more.
Okay. Yeah, let's put this on the shelf, and I'll come back, in March-ish, and hit you guys up to see where you're at, and even in the conversation we had today, I think would be valuable to a lot of people. So, and thank you
Fantastic.
for. So whenever you get that over to me, I appreciate it.
Sounds good. Absolutely. Thanks much.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a great holiday.
Yes, happy Thanksgiving.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.